If you want to support the channel, please consider becoming a member today. Members get early access to videos, access to all the stream VODs, and exclusive access to emotes as well. So if you'd like to support the channel, become a member today.
Your highest calling in life is to be a good husband.
So what if you're a guy in his 20s or 30s who's single? Guess what? You're not going to be a good husband until you are at peace with your self. You're not going to be a good father until you know who you are as a person and what works best for you. You need to figure shit out for yourself, or you need to figure shit out within yourself for yourself before you do any of this. My whole existence in life is to be a good husband. That. Okay? I have autonomy and an identity before I'm married, and if I don't get married, or if I'm married and then I'm no longer married, I still have identity and autonomy after that as well. There's far more purpose to being a man than just being a husband. PragerU has taken a break from identifying as a university, and they've moved into the territory of creating documentaries. And this is a new documentary produced by PragerU. It's called MIA, Masculinity in America. Dramatic.
He also noted that I am an ape and I should go F myself.
My name is Aldo Buttazzoni. As a young man in America, I often think about what my role in society is supposed to be.
Men are trash everywhere in this country.
Men are portrayed in the media as perverts.
Perverts are everywhere.
Buffoons.
And all these commercials are out there where the man's like the lazy guy on the couch. He's a tool.
The concept of masculinity and the perception of man's role in society is rapidly changing.
I don't need a man.
Girl, you don't need no f***ing man.
I can finance myself, I can myself, and I can feed myself.
There's so many trash men out there. Yes, they're all trash.
This shift is leaving young
The violin. Oh no.
men like myself grappling with questions about their identity and sense of purpose.
We spent half a century telling men
Grappling with your identity sounds a little degenerate, doesn't it?
that the future was female and that women allegedly didn't need to rely on men for anything.
Do you think men are important? Like for what?
On a quest to find answers to these riddles and more, I spoke to everyday people on the street and invited a few respected experts to sit down and dig deep into this controversial subject.
Imagine thinking that a man is gonna make you happy.
I mean, yeah, imagine thinking a woman's gonna make you happy. Imagine thinking a man's gonna make you... Imagine thinking a partner is going to just bring you ultimate happiness. Yeah, that's kind of that's kind of a good thing to clown on. That's pretty codependent if you think that your partner is your only source of joy and happiness.
May the Lord make his face to shine upon us, a man and a woman.
Remind me that I don't need a man.
Don't you think wanting a man and needing a man is very different? Like, if someone's like, I really want a man, I want somebody in my life, you know, that's one thing. But like, I need a man in order to function in society. Yeah, I'm kind of glad that women are away from that now. Yeah.
What are some of the stereotypes that you think of when you hear the word masculinity?
Domineering male figure, I suppose.
Unnecessarily protective.
Everybody trying to put men up higher.
I think toxic is probably the first thing that comes to mind.
When you hear the word toxic masculinity, what do you think of?
Disguises itself behind chivalry.
Mansplaining.
Controlling and unemotional.
And woman should glide through the world that I create instead of creating her own world.
Feeling like you have to be like...
Some of these answers are actually really good.
A big, tough guy to be a man.
Conquer and destroy kind of mentality.
What is this set? She's like posing in slow motion. Make sure you use the 60 FPS mode for this. We're gonna want to put it in slow motion, dude.
Well, when you were in your 20s, you were all in on the idea that masculinity is toxic, so much so that you set out to make...
I like how immediately they don't even like give an explanation of toxic masculinity. They just have random people on the street say what they think about masculinity, which is one thing. Toxic masculinity refers to expectations that society places on men as to how they should act masculine that are oftentimes toxic not only to people around the man, but to the man himself. That is what toxic masculinity actually aims to talk about. But they never actually clarify that or give anything there. They just are like, well, all they do is call men toxic.
The documentary, The Red Pill. Can you talk to me about how you changed in your beliefs as you were making this documentary?
That was in my 20s, and I made quite a few films with that mindset. I was really a feminist filmmaker. I was making films about women's rights and also LGBTQ issues. And I saw men as the oppressors of women throughout history. I believed that women made 77 cents on a man's dollar. And I believed in the...
I mean, throughout history, men kind of were oppressors of women. The wage gap thing, that's a little bit misled. I mean, it's true that women on average make less than men, but that does come down to choices women make. But the thing that is left out a lot is, why do women make certain choices that lead to them not making as much compared to their male counterparts?
Patriarchy. So I set out to make a film exposing misogynists. Even while I was filming, I was still really resistant to what I was hearing. I was angry and was even getting hives just thinking about how much I disliked what they were saying. And then when I was transcribing the feminist interviews, I was realizing there were a lot of plot holes.
Rape apologist, incest supporting, woman hating scum.
The feminists really didn't understand the men's rights argument very well. And so because they didn't...
Which was, what is the men's rights movement argument that the feminists don't understand very well? I would like to hear this argument.
Understand it very well. They couldn't debate it very well.
Don't even start with that whole, oh, but you don't think about the men's issue. Well, then you know what? Start your own movement, which they have, but maybe make it a little more about legitimate issues.
And I realized that they weren't really listening to the men's rights perspective.
He also noted that
the more and more I've dug into men's issues and boys' issues, the more I realize how important a present father is in a child's life. And that never became more apparent to me than in the last 3 years of starting my own journey of having a son and now a second son.
This is so boring. We get it. Men are important in society and men are important for raising kids. We know this. Yeah, no shit. Can you move on, please? What are the men's rights movement talking points?
When you remove masculinity, you don't get docile, weak men. You get dangerous men that lash back out at society.
There's a really great African proverb that says, a child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth.
Basically, what it sounds like you're saying is men will commit atrocious acts if they are not accepted in some way or another. Maybe that's true. So maybe we can start by not telling men that crying is for girls and weaklings, and every time they do it, that means that they're a little pussy-ass bitch.
Over time, it seems like toxic masculinity has become a catch-all term for any male behavior that someone finds offensive or unpleasant. This inconsistent, arbitrary criticism leads many men to fall into the trap of actual toxic behavior.
Why don't you actually look up the definition for real of toxic masculinity instead of just saying what you think a bunch of people actually think the definition is? What? Google, define toxic masculinity, a set of attitudes and ways of behaving stereotypically associated with or expected of men, regarded as having a negative impact on men and on society as a whole. So that's what toxic masculinity means by definition. He could have literally typed this in Google the same way that I did, but he chose not to.
Manhood isn't something that just happens by accident. Tell me about your upbringing and the masculine role models that you had growing up.
Well, for me, it was a little bumpy. You know, so I was born to a teenage mom. So I was born to a fatherless household. I think I was in jeopardy before my stepfather came around. Statistically speaking, I definitely was in jeopardy. The guys going to jail, the mental illness, everything says that without a father or a man in the house, you're vulnerable. I don't want my family, my children to be vulnerable. My presence changes everything for them. They can sleep at night. They know if there's a threat, their father will deal with it.
I have an 8-year-old daughter who is absolutely dynamic, who can do anything. Athletically, intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally, she is a dynamo. The fact is, I don't want her playing against boys in soccer. I don't even let my sons rough her up.
I like how it was like, the importance of men in your daughter's life instantly moves over to, and this is why trans people are evil.
Do you think I'm gonna let your son rough her up?
We have this idea right now that men and women are completely equal, that they're almost interchangeable. Is that correct?
No, not even close. I mean, my wife was gone for the weekend. My children can see a big difference between mommy and daddy. She brings this softness, this nurturing. I bring this charge, this demand.
Why can you... Isn't that a little concerning, though, for you as a man? Why are you not able to nurture your children? What if your wife dies? Like, God forbid. Like, that's as terrible as it could be, right? But, like, what if the worst of the worst happens and your wife dies? You don't have the ability to be nurturing to your own kids? You need the womanly feminine touch? That's concerning, my friend.
And it's not planned that way. It's just masculinity. Who am I naturally as a man?
It's tough for boys today, and I feel for them because they're told that they're toxic if they hold the door open. All these things that we're seen as...
That happened actually just the other day. I was hanging out with Holly and I opened the door up for her, and then she told me I was toxic. Yup.
All these things that we're seen as chivalrous are now looked down upon.
I teach my sons, they open the door for their mother, and get this, they open it for their sister. We put a premium on our role. You know, everything should be equal, not equal in responsibility, we're equal in value. And the fact that we're not the same is what allows us to shine. My wife's femininity is able to flourish because of me, but so is my masculinity. Who I am as a man and a father, very different. Without her contrast there, my sons wouldn't get the same lesson. My daughter wouldn't get the same lesson.
We have seen the...
I mean, okay, but again, like going back to what you said at the beginning about like they get something nurturing from their mom and stuff like that, like doesn't that concern you that you as the father are not seen as nurturing at all to your kids? Doesn't that concern you?
We have seen the damaging impact of society, public figures, and the media vilifying masculinity and disregarding the role of fathers at home. But what do our psychological establishments say about men's roles in relationships and society at large?
Dr. Chloe Carmichael.
So are they going to give us a bunch of facts that we've already known about how it's important for like kids to have a strong father figure and shit like this? Because the subtle point that's being made that isn't actually being defended very well is that, you see, it's damaging when kids don't have men in their life, and the left thinks that men shouldn't be around.
New York clinical psychologist and relationship expert. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
This is a great subject. A lot of people are interested in
this idea that masculinity is synonymous with violence or war, these other negative stereotypes. When people start to believe this, it makes sense that they would want to neutralize masculinity, if not destroy it altogether.
One of the things that to me has stood out as a psychologist is that the American Psychological Association came out with these guidelines about working with men and boys, and it really, in my opinion, pathologized traditional masculinity. The entire document was really full of criticisms of things like a drive for success, a drive for power, a drive for competition, all of which...
So this is a really common one conservatives bring up about this APA thing, which if you read the American Psychological Association's actual analyses on traditional masculinity, then you would be able to see very clearly why they have an issue there. The APA defines traditional masculinity as a particular constellation of standards that have held sway over large segments of the population, including anti-femininity, achievement, disgust of the appearance of weakness, and adventure, risk, and violence. The guidelines, which were highlighted in the January issue of the APA's Monitor on Psychology magazine, say the pressure boys and men feel to conform to certain aspects of traditional masculinity can lead to poor health outcomes, including higher rates of suicide, substance abuse, violence, and early death. So I like how this documentary talks about how the one thing, they say it's bad to be successful. No, they don't. They're talking about how it's harmful if that is the main thing you're focused on, and if you find your worth and you define your masculinity on whether or not you are successful. The APA Chief of Professional Practice defended the new guidelines and said, the guidelines support encouraging positive aspects of traditional masculinity, such as courage and leadership, and discarding traits such as violence and sexism, while noting that the vast majority of men are not violent. Traits of so-called, quote, traditional masculinity, like suppressing emotions and masking distress, often start early in life and have been linked to less willingness by boys and men to seek help, more risk-taking and aggression, and possibly harming themselves and those with whom they interact. This is true, but the APA has made it abundantly clear that they were not vilifying all men. They weren't demonizing all men. It isn't easy to be a man in the United States. Demands put on men, whether it's to be the protector, to be the provider, to respond to situations in certain ways, to prove yourself as a man, end up not just outwardly destructive, but also inwardly destructive. So the APA guidelines make room for positive qualities about masculinity. They do. They talk about that too. And this documentary is dishonestly focusing on just the one negative part that they disagree with those standards.
A drive for power, a drive for competition.
Also a drive for power? Yeah. Telling men that the way that they're truly masculine, the way that they're real men, is by being powerful. Do you think that would ever encourage any men to take power over, I don't know, women? Because I do.
All of which are actually things that can really help society.
Are women more dissatisfied in their relationships with men today?
Yes, I mean, statistics show that women and men are actually both unhappy, and there could be a lot of different social drivers.
18% of men and women are suffering from depression. Yeah, is this 18% in a relationship or not in a relationship?
Around that, but I do think it's important to look at and consider the fact that maybe we're forcing people into these politically correct boxes that don't.
Maybe you're forcing men into boxes like, hey, you're a man, you shouldn't be crying. Hey, you're a man, if you wear a skirt, then you're responsible for the downfall of Western civilization. Yeah, it's almost like conservatives do this all the time.
Women don't typically even say want to date a man who makes less money than they do. Women typically don't want to date a man who's shorter than they are.
Are you just saying this is because of biology? Couldn't that have been socialized into people as well? If, for example, you're taught that you're a woman, so you're attracted to men, okay? So a man looks like this. This is what a man looks like. This is how a man behaves. If he doesn't behave this way, then he's not a real man. He's not a man that's actually going to treat you right. Do you think that could play a role in whether or not women are going to have a preference directed towards certain types of men?
That points to the simple fact that women tend to be drawn to a man who is at least able to provide and to protect. I just feel like there's a lack of it.
So even if you look at the stats about how women want men that are taller, or how men typically want women that are younger, you can look at the marriage rates and see that maybe women say they want a man who's taller, but who are they marrying? They're usually marrying men that are about the same height as them, or even shorter than them. They don't actually care that much when it comes to marriage. Same with men. Men may say they want a younger partner, but who are they actually marrying? They're marrying people that are in their same age range.
Acknowledgement about the role of men and their contributions, just like these young women want a man who's going to love and respect them as a woman. I would encourage them to think about offering the same gift to their boys and men.
You think traditional masculinity is good?
I don't think anything traditional is good. I think everything is supposed to evolve. What's traditionally masculine or feminine doesn't work in today's society.
You think that society needs strong men?
Women could be strong too. But
Talking about women, does society need strong men?
I would only say certain jobs.
Do we not need men?
Society needs strong people. Why does this have to be men? Why does this have to be women? Society needs strong people sometimes. Both men and women can exercise strength in different regards.
And to protect us?
I don't think we need men to protect people in particular, because I don't really believe on the implications of social gender.
What about building the roads and going to war and, and sewage jobs and construction? Don't we need men for certain things?
Women do construction jobs. Women can do sewer jobs. It sounds like he's listing jobs purposely that people in general don't want to do. like sewage jobs, and because the majority of those people that do those jobs currently are men, he can then use that as like a point in favor of his dumb argument, which doesn't actually make any sense.
We need just bodies for a lot of things. What people call manpower is just body power, and guess what? Women have bodies too.
Depression for a man is that feeling, nobody wants me. I'm not needed anymore. Basically, I'm out of work. Nobody there to respond to me. Nobody there for me to fix, help, serve, support. Being out of work is the major depression for men, or being in a marriage where you feel you can't do anything to make your partner happy. And that's why depression is very different for a man than for a woman. Men and women are different. Biologically, we're different. And to respect those differences is not equality. When the people say we want gender equality, what they're asking for is gender sameness. Men and women are different in a positive.
You can recognize the differences that men and women may have, but also recognize that those people might be equal as far as the fact that they're both people. They both have autonomy, they both have dreams and goals and desires and sentience, etc.
Way.
Can you talk to me a little bit more about that need for seeing a healthy relationship between a man and wife and that effect it has on the kids?
Yeah, it's so important. 25% of children today are growing up in a household without a father. 50% of African American boys are growing up without a father. You have no role model at all of I can be a powerful, good man. They don't know what that is. And a good man is...
Why can't you have your mom be your role model? What? What if it's a daughter that you have? Then doesn't she need the mom to look at as someone who's the role model?
Someone that women trust. So does my mother trust dad?
And the prevailing narrative today is that traditional gender roles aren't necessary anymore because they were completely a result of a social construction.
Yes, let me interrupt. It was a social construction by wise people to make men good and make women happy. That was the social construction that did it. That's why my family could be so happy growing up. It was the 50s. A man could earn enough money to support his wife. She could spend time with her children until they grew up. She could hire help to help her with her children. She could live in a safe neighborhood. That's all gone. Middle class is crashing down.
We've gone too far. We've gotten too...
I don't even know what to say to this. Like, it's true that the middle class is shrinking. Then shouldn't you be taking note about the economic changes that have happened in this country? Usually it's the left that is way more accommodating to the fact that there have been economic changes in this country.
And taking a couple steps back into traditional gender roles is probably what we need right now.
Well, what suffers is boys. What suffers is girls. Boys don't know what it means to be a man. Girls don't.
Well, I can tell you what it means to be I can tell you what it doesn't mean to be a man, and that's not traditional masculinity. Just being strong, stoic, unemotional all the time.
John Rosamond has a master's degree in psychology, is the father of 2 and the grandfather of 7. He has been offering parenting advice through his column and books for decades.
Can you tell me about how this idea of the family center being the husband and wife has changed throughout your lifetime?
The American family over the last 50 years has become a matriarchy. The American father is...
What? The woman is now in charge. The men are just handing over the reins to the women.
Becoming more and more irrelevant. That dad is not the child-rearing authority, mom is. The dad's opinion, it's often treated as irrelevant. His voice is a nuisance. When boys grow up without fathers, they don't understand what authentic masculinity looks like. And they get involved in drugs, and they get involved in gangs, and they get involved in...
Well, what does authentic masculinity look like? Because a lot of the times conservatives treat authentic masculinity like traditional masculinity, which is hating weakness, femininity, engaging in violence, suppressing emotion.
You know, other things that are symptoms of a fake masculinity that is overtaking America. Women, greater and greater percentage of them, really do believe that they can get along without men.
Why can't they?
Men embody traits that women don't have. And women don't realize it, but when push comes to shove, women will look to men for protection.
What are some ways that you've seen as a child?
Oh no, I need a police officer, but it's a woman police officer that shows up. Oh no, I need a man police officer.
child therapist, that education and child raising has changed that's had a negative impact on young boys.
The primary example of this is the diagnosis of ADHD. But probably 3 out of every 4 kids are boys. The message...
Isn't that because boys tend to demonstrate more external hyperactive activities, whereas girls do not? So boys with ADHD are noticed as having ADHD or even autism far more frequently than girls, because girls have more of those struggles internally, whereas boys make those struggles external issues. Couldn't that have anything to do with it? Or no, is it just because the liberals are all demonizing men?
Says there's something wrong with you, and this pill will correct it. I think translating the sense of induced helplessness in our young male population, whenever I hear of a young person in his mid-20s, even early 30s, who's living in the parents' basement, it's always a young man. And I think that this reflects that young men are just kind of losing a sense of purpose, and we don't realize.
And how exactly is that the fault of anyone other than the young men?
Deprecation of the American male is going to seriously weaken American culture. We need men. We need women, but we need men.
Gay!
What's your personal message to boys and young men?
Something that a lot of women have wrong about men is they think that men are about domination and control. And I actually think ultimately what men want, I think they want to be loved and appreciated and seen for their sacrifices. And I don't think that's what our society is doing right now.
I hope that men would figure out that they were created for God. They were created.
And there it is. You know, I was feeling really shitty about being a man, and then I realized God made me, and now I feel equally as shitty.
They were created to be a son, a husband, and a father. And it's okay to be a man.
I love that. I love how for men, there's no personal identity. There's no identity in yourself. It's just your job is to be a father and a husband. That's your existence, is dedicated to providing and caring for another person. Yourself? Fuck you, selfish. Other people? Based.
I don't think that they need to wait for permission from anybody. That's part of the masculine role, I think, is to be able to just assert who he is and to be who he is.
My personal message to young boys, young men, is that your highest calling in life is to be a good husband, more than anything else.
So what if you're a guy in his 20s or 30s who's single? Now suddenly you're worthless, useless, have no job, no goal, nothing at all. There is no purpose for you until you get married? Really? Guess what? You're not going to be a good husband until you are at peace with your self. You're not going to be a good father until you know who you are as a person and what works best for you. Until you know those things, you're not going to be a good husband. You're not going to be a good father. You're not going to be useful to anyone else, okay? You need to figure shit out for yourself, or you need to figure shit out within yourself for yourself before you do any of this. My whole existence in life is to be a good husband. Fuck that. Okay? I have autonomy and an identity before I'm married, and if I don't get married, or if I'm married and then I'm no longer married, I still have identity and autonomy after that as well. There's far more purpose to being a man than just being a husband.
When masculinity is vilified, the path inevitably leads to...
Gee, masculinity really is being vilified. Even the PragerU guy's wearing a purse. God damn.
To a more feminine culture, dissatisfied women, confused children, and a broken society. But when traditional virtues like assertiveness, strength, and confidence are harnessed for good.
Good thing the APA, which you were just shitting on, actually encourages these positive qualities of masculinity. Oof. Sucks when the point you're trying to make is actually disproven by the same industry that you're using as your antithesis to your dumb argument.
So, men, Harness your masculinity.
Come on,
Seek
man.
out responsibility.
Do it, men. Grab your thrusting masculinity and jerk it till it's no more.
And lead with courage.
Wow. And I officially feel proud of being a man again. Before I hated myself. Then I watched this documentary and now I realize I still hate myself. I've just also watched this documentary. Sad.